The Prince-Bishopric of Liege was a state of the Holy Roman Empire in the Low Countries, situated for the most part in present Belgium, which was ruled by the Bishop of Liège, who held an imperial estate and had seat and voice at the imperial diet. The Prince-Bishopric of Liège should not be confused with the diocese of Liege, which was larger. The bishops of Liege acquired their status as a prince-bishop between 980 and 985 when Bishop Notger, who had been the Bishop of Liege since 972, received secular control of the County of Huy from Otto II, Holy Roman Emperor. The Prince-Bishopric belonged from 1500 on to the Lower Rhenish Westphalian Circle. Its territory included most of the present Belgian provinces of Liege and Limburg, and some exclaves in other parts of Belgium and the Netherlands. It briefly became a republic from 1789 to 1791, before reverting to a prince-bishopric in 1791. The role of prince-bishop permanently ended when the state was annexed by France in 1795. In 1815, it became part of the United Kingdom of the Netherlands, and in 1830 it was within the part of that kingdom which split off to become Belgium. The principality ruled by the bishops of Liege was never part of the 17 provinces of the Spanish and Austrian southern Netherlands, but from the 16th century onwards its politics were strongly influenced by the Dukes of Burgundy and later the Habsburgs, though remaining under the sovereignty of the family de la Marck. In 1559 its 1,636 parishes were grouped into 8 archdeaconries and 28 councils. The most important cities of the bishopric were Liege, Beringen, Bilzen, Bourg-Loon, Brie, Châtelet, Ciney, Couven, Dinan, Prévost-la-Ville, Haymont, Hasselt, Herkdestad, Huy, Marseille, Pier, Sint-Truiden, Stockholm, Thuan, Tongeren, Verviers, Visay and Waremmer. The city of Maastricht fell under the joint jurisdiction of the Prince-Bishop of Liege and the Duke of Brabant. The second city of the Prince-Bishopric thus kept its status apart throughout the ancient regime. Medieval Prince-Bishopric. The diocese of the medieval bishops was, until 1559, much larger than the princedom which was in his possession. This princely domain of the Church of Liege had been gradually enlarged by donations and acquisitions. In the 10th century, the bishops received secular power over the County of Huy, then already part of the diocese. Notger, by securing the feudal authority of Huy, became himself a sovereign prince. This status his successors retained until the French Revolution, and throughout the period of nearly 8 centuries the Prince-Bishopric of Liege succeeded in maintaining its autonomy, though theoretically it was part of the Holy Roman Empire. This virtual independence was owed largely to the ability of its bishops, who on several occasions played an important part in international politics, being strategically positioned between France and Germany. Throughout the Middle Ages, the Prince-Bishopric was further expanded with the Lordship of Bouillon in 1096, the acquisition of the County of Loon in 1366 and the County of Huy in 1568. Notger, the founder of the principality, also rebuilt the Cathedral of St. Lambert, as well as the Episcopal Palace. He was also involved in other building activities in the city, which flourished under his rule. This bishop also strengthened the parochial organization of the city. He was one of the first church leaders to spread the observance of All Souls' Day, which he authorized for his diocese. Under Notger's administration, following up on the work of Heraclius, educational institutions in Liege flourished. With these two bishops, the schools of Liege were, in fact, at that time one of the brightest literary foci of the period. In the 11th century the city was indeed known as the Athens of the North. Liege for more than a century occupied among the nations a position in regard to science which it has never recovered. Subsequent bishops, Balderic of Luz, Wobodo, Laurandus, Reginald, Neitard, the learned Wazo, and Theoduin, the valiantly sustained the heritage of Notger. The schools formed many brilliant scholars, and gave the Catholic Church Popes Stephen IX and Nicholas II. The diocese also supplied the University of Paris with a number of important doctors: William of Saint-Thierry, Gerard of Liege and Godfrey of Fontaine. Alger of Liege was an important intellectual of the period. He was first appointed deacon of Church of St. Bartholomew and finally retired at the monastery of Cluny. In the reign of Henry of Verden, a tribunal was instituted to prevent war and enforce the peace of God. Otto II increased the territory of the principality by purchasing the lordship of Bouillon. He remained faithful to Emperor Henry IV, who died as his guest. Henry of Namur was venerated as a martyr. During the administration of Alexander of Julias the Pope, the Emperor, and St. Bernard visited Liege. The episcopate of Raoul of Zachringen was marked by the preaching of the reformer Lambert le Béguet, who is credited with founding the Beguines. Albert of Leuven was elected Bishop of Liege in 1191, but Emperor Henry VI, on the pretext that the election was doubtful, gave the seat to Lothair of Hochstadt. Albert's election was confirmed by the Pope, but in 1192, shortly after he took office, he was assassinated by 3 German knights at Reims. It is probable that the emperor was privy to this murder, but Albert was canonized. In 1195, Albert de Cuic formally recognized the political franchise of the people of Liege. During the 12th century, the cathedral chapter, along with the bishop, assumed a more important role in the history of the principality. The struggles between the upper and lower classes, in which the prince-bishops frequently intervened, developed through the 13th and 14th centuries, and culminate in the 15th century in the pillage and destruction of the episcopal city. In the reign of Robert of Thorold, St. Juliana, a nun of Cornillon Abbey, was led by certain visions to the project of having a feast established in honor of the Blessed Sacrament. After much hesitation, the bishop approved of her idea, but death prevented the institution of the feast. The completion of the work was left to a former prior of the Dominicans in Liege, Hugh of Saint-Cher, who returned to the city as papal legate. In 1252, Hugh made the Feast of the Blessed Sacrament an obligation throughout his diocese. John of Troyes, who, after having been archdeacon at Liege, was elected pope as Urban IV, encouraged the observance of the Feast of Corpus Christi in the whole Church. Another archdeacon of Liege became pope under the name Gregory X and deposed the unworthy Henry of Guelders. The Peace of Aix, signed in 1316 during the reign of Adolphe II de la Marck, regulated the relations between the prince-bishop and his subjects. Nevertheless, internal discord continued, and the episcopate of Arnold of Horn was marked by the triumph of the popular party. In 1366, the County of Huy was annexed to the bishopric. Burgundian and Habsburg influence. Upon the death of Louis of Maille, Count of Flanders, in 1384, the Low Countries began the unification within the Burgundian Netherlands. Though the principality was still nominally independent, the Dukes of Burgundy have had an increasing influence on its government. Louis of Bourbon was placed on the throne of Liege by the political machinations of Philip the Good, Duke of Burgundy. The population resisted Burgundian rule, leading to the Liege Wars, the destruction of Dinan in 1466, and of Liege in 1468 by Charles the Bold, marking the ending of democratic ascendancy in the principality. Charles V completed the union of the 17 provinces in the 1540s, and unofficially also controlled the principality. He nominated Diet-The, who brought a period of restoration. Hérode was an enlightened protector of the arts. It was he who commenced the struggle against the Protestant reformers, which his successors carried forth, especially Gerard of Grosbeek, with the object of assisting in this struggle. Paul IV, by bull, created new bishoprics in the Low Countries. The new bishoprics were created largely at the expense of the Diocese of Liege. Many of its parishes were given to the dioceses of Roermond, Hertogenbosch, and Namur, or were added to the existing dioceses of Mechelen and Antwerp. The number of deaneries in the Diocese of Liege was reduced to 13. Liege formed the last link in the chain of Habsburg allies that made up the so-called Spanish Road, a military corridor between Spanish-controlled Lombardy and the Spanish Netherlands, completely encircled by Spanish territory. Liege was protected by treaties of neutrality which permitted the passage of Spanish troops through the Prince-Bishop's territory, provided that they spent no more than 2 nights in one place. The importance of the Prince-Bishopric to Habsburg military logistics in the 80 Years' War prompted Spanish intervention foiling a Dutch invasion. In 1595, most of the bishops in the 17th century were foreigners, many of them holding several bishoprics at once. The frequent absences gave free scope for those feuds of the Chiru and the Grigno to which Maximilian Henry of Bavaria put a stop by the Edict of 1681. In the middle of the 18th century, the ideas of the French encyclopedists began to be received at Liege. Bishop de Velbruck encouraged the propagation and thus prepared the way for the Revolution Liégeoise, partially connected with the French Revolution, a protest against the absolutist rule of prince-bishops. César Constantin Franz van Hoensbroek developed into the 1789 revolution in Liege. At the beginning of 1791, the revolution was crushed by troops on the orders of the Holy Roman Empire. The Prince-Bishopric was dissolved in 1795 when it was annexed by France. Its territory was divided over the départements Meuse-Inférieure, Auvergne, and Sambre-et-Meuse. Timeline. Gallery.